All right, I'm Jonathan Singer. I'm the Senior Director of Policy Programs here with the Boulder Chamber, and I want to welcome you all to our Homeless Solutions update. As you may or may not remember, Downtown Boulder Partnership, along with Visit Boulder, have worked in coalition on a set of values and principles, conducting extensive research over the last year. And there's been a lot of changes. There's been a lot of updates. And so we're here today to hear from an esteemed group of panelists who are experts in this topic here. Before we begin, we wanted to give you a little bit of background on where we are and also where we've been. So with that, let's go to the next slide. Oh, and did I not mention Downtown Boulder Partnership? Okay. And so they're in the little box there. The first thing we're going to do, believe it or not, is actually ask you to take out your phones. This is the opposite of typically what we do in these. What we want to do here is a little bit of a poll. We want to ask you, and if the QR code is not working, you can always go to menti.com and enter the code there. So we'll give everyone a minute to do this. We're going to ask you 2 questions. Please answer only the first question first. The first question is going to be a question on progress. How much progress do you think our experts have made in the last year? And you'll have 4 opportunities, 4 answers to give. You say, yes, a lot of progress, no, not a lot. You can even say that you're not sure, because today you're going to hear from them. And then at the very end of this presentation, we want you to answer the second question and see whether or not we have made satisfactory progress with what seems like an intractable issue, but isn't. So with that being said, has everyone got that QR code? I quickly learned that I needed bifocals. This is a whole other story. All right, if we've all got the QR code, Charlie, we can go to the next slide here. Before I jump in with our approach, I wanted Charlene to come up with Visit Boulder, talk a little bit about what to where we are, at least what got Visit Boulder to where we are today, what created the impetus for this, and then I'm going to run into this. So, Charlene, if you would join us, thank you again for all your work and all your help.
Thank you. Hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here this afternoon. We have a lot to update you guys on, but I just wanted to go back a little bit in time with how we started with this whole framework process. So, as many of you know, Visit Boulder, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, is the official destination marketing organization for the city of Boulder. So, big picture, what we do is we bring in business and visitation for the economic benefit of Boulder. We do that by marketing our key assets. So our arts, our culture, our innovation, culinary scene, our beautiful blue skies, our big open spaces, our big asset, and our brand. And about 2 years ago, over 2 years ago, we removed the Boulder Creek path from all of our marketing material and from our Boulder, Colorado, USA.com website, because the Boulder Creek path was not safe. It wasn't safe for our residents and it wasn't safe for our visitors. And this was after, you may recall the story, there was a 75-year-old woman that came in from out of state and she was grabbed by the hair and thrown to the ground while she was walking with her husband around the Boulder Creek path. And this was after there were several assaults that happened at the Duchamp Tea House. And one in particular that kind of stuck with me was a homeless person walked into the tea house, assaulted the general manager that was working that day in the middle of a wedding ceremony. And at that time, too, all the employees had to be escorted out to their cars at night because it wasn't safe to do that on their own. And this was also after the time that my daughter, who went to Boulder High, came home and told us that she was riding her bike to school that day and she was chased by a homeless man that had gotten on his bike, chased after her, was taunting her, "Come back, little girl, I want to talk to you," and it really scared her, obviously. And little did that guy know that my daughter was on the varsity soccer team, basketball team, and mountain bike team, and she had legs of steel. And there's no way that anybody could probably keep up with her when she was scared. But it still was a pretty unsettling moment for mom. And you have to think about the children that were walking to school, what was happening down there. And there was a lot of other stories that were going on at that time, but we pulled the creek path from our marketing because it wasn't a top 10 place for people to go when they were visiting Boulder. And it was a sad day, one of our crown jewels, and it also was a pretty serious wake-up call for a lot of us. So some months later, I was working on some strategic planning, long-term strategic planning for our organization, and I brought in a consulting firm by the name of Destination Next. And they go around and evaluate destinations based on visitation and if it's an attractive place for visitors to come. And they evaluate all these different criteria, destination strength, the community engagement, and part of that process was to send out a comprehensive stakeholder survey to all of you. It wasn't a survey to residents, it wasn't a survey to visitors, it was for people who knew the Boulder community, whether owners of businesses, our government leaders, our city council, and people who knew Boulder more than most. And they weighed in on 24 different variables. We got this report back. And I'm happy to say that Boulder scored very high in a lot of important areas, but we also scored very low, very significantly low when it came to homelessness and safety. And so, you know, here I'm thinking about, and this was also a time that things were going pretty bad down on the Pearl Street Mall. There was a lot of restaurants that were having issues, the retail shops, there was a lot of issues. Our block ambassadors were busy 24/7. And it made me really think, wow, okay, so we have the Pearl Street Mall, we have the Dushanbe Tea House, we have the Boulder Creek, all of our crown jewels. This is getting kind of serious. And so I went to my good friend at the Boulder Chamber with John Hare, and I showed him the results of this assessment. And I said, these are the things that we're seeing and hearing. And he looked it over and I dropped his head and said, yep, these are the things that we're seeing and hearing too. And then he went down and talked to Chip, who was the previous CEO of Downtown Boulder Partnership. And Chip said, yep, these are the things that we're seeing and hearing too. And so that's when this whole thing started. The three of us got together. We started meeting every 2 weeks for over 6 months. We dug in hard. We researched, we investigated, we talked to a lot of different communities around the country. And we were kind of getting in the weeds of things. We were starting to argue about what the right solutions might be. And I want to tip my hat off to John Taylor for his leadership in all of this because he brought in reinforcement. He brought in Leslie Durgan, who is a previous city mayor and city council person. He brought in this forceful team, Devin and Jonathan, and these two guys pretty much organized all of those panel discussions with experts in town, or all of those roundtable discussions that many of you came to. It included law enforcement, our sheriff with the jail. It included the whole discussion on the camping ban and the civil liberties. It brought in people who were working on housing and on our shelter. It brought in people that had had experiences, and I know Jen's here somewhere, and I just want to let you know that we are still listening. We are. And it brought in the people that were really in the trenches when it came to mental illness and drug abuse and all the services that we needed to provide. And that all bubbled up to our framework that came out a year ago this month. Here we are, in here what our folks had to say here on what's changed since that time, and we want to definitely hear how you guys are feeling about what's happening. I also just really want to thank everybody that's been involved in this process so far. Our panels that are here today, all the panelists that have been involved in the past. Our framework team, which now includes Rachel Friend, also a previous or recovering, as she is today, council person, Bettina from the Downtown Boulder Partnership, and Terry DeCava-Smith, who's been on the front lines of all of this for a long time down on the Pearl Street Mall. And also, I'd like to thank our city leadership and our city council for meeting in with us on this, because we needed your support, your funding, and your ideas as well. And also just to thank all of you for your voices and all of this. obviously a community effort. We're all in this together. We have more to do, we know that, but we really appreciate everybody being here today and contributing to everything that we've been working on so far. So thank you.
Thank you, Charlene. And so before I go into what our framework was, I'm going to do that very quickly. I want to thank our elected officials who are here today. I see in the crowd here Councilmember Taisha Adams, Mayor Brockett, Matt Benjamin, Councilmember Matt Benjamin. I think I saw Tina Marquis, yeah, sitting there as well as County Commissioner Claire Levy and Councilmember Tara Weiner. You guys know you all have a city council meeting that's coming up later tonight. And in the back there we have State House Representative Judy Amable. And so I know just got through a very busy legislative session, I know, so we truly appreciate you after 720 bills coming to visit us here today. So genuinely appreciate that. So did I miss any elected officials here? Thank goodness. All right. So I also thank Chief Redfern and certainly our staff for being here as well today. So very quickly, because I really do want to get to our panel here today, I'm just going to give basically a 10-second update on each of these things because you can read what's on the board here. Number one, none of us who sat here putting together this framework are experts. We approach this with humility, and we are grateful for the thoughtfulness and hard work of our service providers and law enforcement for their daily, hourly, minutely efforts. We can go to the next slide. All right. So these are our goals. Too many people are dying. This is not who our community is. We know this. Too many people in one of the wealthiest communities in the world are dying here in Boulder. At the same time, we need to eliminate the criminal activity associated with people who are unhoused, protect our public spaces, make sure that we have a safe and clean environment, but ensure that there are sincere and effective pathways out of homelessness. This is a multi-pronged approach. So we'll go to the next slide, the last slide here that I've got. Go back one. There we go. Just in case you forgot, we're here to save lives. At the same time, encampments in public spaces can't happen. We cannot make Boulder a homeless magnet. We need a criminal justice system that is responsive to everybody, and at the same time, we need robust access to mental health services, drug treatment, recovery, and employment services. And very last, but certainly not least, it involves incorporating your voices, but also the voices of people with lived experience. So that's why we're here today. That's what we're here to do, not only in our creation of our framework, but moving forward today as we hear this update. As we move forward here, we go to the next slide. This is why we brought on Rachel Friend, our former Mayor Pro Tem, and Leslie Durgan, and brought them on in an employee capacity here, because we realized that we couldn't do this by ourselves. We need to roll up our sleeves. So they've been making some great progress here. Leslie, if you want to come up and share just a brief update before we go over again.
Shall we dance? Welcome everyone. Very quickly, Rachel and I have been meeting with people throughout the community. Many of the panelists here. And I'm just going to give you a quick synopsis of what we have found thus far. A lot more. I think one of the major takeaways for us is that there are a number of people that are working very hard, very successfully to change the face of homelessness, to provide services, to provide housing, to enact the housing first policy, but to provide supportive service. Are we done? We've got a lot more work still to do. But there is a real effort in this community, and it's one that is quite successful. But the other thing we have found is that very few people know that that's going on. And so this roundtable is very important to start a community education program to really tell people what's working, what isn't, what are the key challenges that remain, and to really engage everyone so that we can move the needle and hopefully end homelessness in our community. I want to focus quickly on some of the major policy implementations that have happened in the past year. That the Chamber and our partners in Visit Boulder and Downtown Boulder have been part of, supporting the reimagined policing plan, which provides additional law enforcement resources, advocating for the Day Services Center, which Michael may bring us up to date on in terms of its status, both as a resource for the unhoused and to be a good neighbor. Taking the lead in support of Boulder County Housing Development Initiative that provides significant additional money for affordable and accessible housing throughout Boulder and in Boulder County. And we will continue to do our research and our work to identify what's working, what isn't. We want to hear from all of you through this poll before and after. And particularly, we want to hear from our panelists who really are spending every waking hour working on these important issues, both for what most people consider the homeless, the single adults, but we have recognized and need a lot more attention family homelessness in this community as well, because it exists and most people have no idea the number of children and families that also experiencing homelessness in Boulder. It's in a program that the programs that need a lot of attention and the community a lot of education about. So with that, let's move on and hear from our panel.
All right, we have a phenomenal lineup here of folks, and so we go to our next slide here. And as questions come up, as you probably already saw on your seat, you have a functioning pen and a functioning piece of paper, and we are going to be giving you a penmanship test later on today. Now, in all seriousness, we want to give you the opportunity to ask questions, but we want our presenters to be able to share their thoughts ahead of time here. So what we're going to do is we are going to ask you to write down those questions, and either myself, Rachel, Charlene will be here to collect those questions, and then our moderator here, our program policy specialist, Devin Edgley, will be here to ask those questions. So, and by way of introduction, I want you to all welcome to the panel. We have District Attorney Michael Doherty. He's the District Attorney for the 20th Judicial District here in Boulder County. And in his role, he oversees and handles the prosecution of cases involving violations of state criminal laws. This does not include the municipal ordinances such as the camping ban, although his office does work closely with law enforcement agencies and cities to maintain community safety, do justice, and to fight for crime victims. We also have Michael Bluff, with 17 years of experience in homeless services at the Boulder Shelter for the Homeless, including work on the floor of the shelter, street outreach, permanent supportive housing case manager, director of all shelter programs, chief housing officer, and CEO now of the Boulder Shelter. We are also grateful to have Robin Bohannon, a 36-year resident of Boulder and spending her career in public service, serving on Boulder City Council for 4 years. She has provided direct services to people with persistent mental illness, those living with HIV and AIDS, and currently serves as the director of Boulder County Community Services, which houses mostly federally funded programs that began during the War on Poverty and includes the regional coordination of homeless solutions for Boulder County. We're also thrilled to have Megan Newton. She's the policy advisor on homelessness for the City of Boulder's Housing and Human Services Department. She's dedicated 20 years to working in nonprofits and providing services to individuals experiencing homelessness. For the past year and a half, Megan has been shaping policy for the city, bringing her extensive experience to the public sector. And we're particularly grateful for the trip that Cole Chandler has made today. Up from Denver, you never know whether that's, a few minutes or a week. But thanks for making it up to up US 36 to come visit us. Cole Chandler is a collaborative and solutions-oriented leader working to address Denver's housing and homeless crisis as Mayor Mike Johnson Senior Advisor on Homelessness, and Deputy Director of All in Mile High, Mayor Johnson's effort to end unsheltered homelessness in Denver. So prior to joining the administration in July 23, Cole served as the first Director of Homelessness Initiatives at the Colorado Department of Human Services, served as the co-founder Executive Director of the Colorado Village Collaborative, where he developed Denver's micro-community model, and as a live-in volunteer at the Denver Catholic Worker House, where he learned about Denver's housing and homelessness challenges firsthand from housemates coming directly from the streets. Cole holds his master's in divinity from Baylor University, where he began to embrace his lifelong passion for creating social change. He loves skiing, biking, running, and coming to panels like this. And he lives in North Denver with his wife and 2 young sons. Jen Leos. Jen is our co-CEO of Mental Health Partners. Graduating from the University of New Hampshire and Boston College with a BA in psychology and an MSW. She has been a Mental Health Partners team member for 23 years. She was drawn to Mental Health Partners because of its mission and vision to serve from a client-centered and compassionate approach. MHP's strong commitment to provide quality care through recovery practices and in strong partnership with clients and community felt like a perfect match. She's honored and humbled each day to serve with extraordinarily talented and dedicated employees, and truly believes Mental Health Partners' commitment to impacting the health equity of our community through excellent and innovative care makes the work we all do, including the work done by MHP, so meaningful. And last but not least, we are grateful to have Victor King. Victor has served the last 30 years. 6 of those years were spent homeless in Boulder. The last 2 have been as a homeowner in South Boulder. He works in Mental Health Partners as a recovery coach manager for the statewide opioid and stimulant response through the statewide opioid and stimulant response grant. I'm really got to talk to our federal partners about easier words. Being a parent is his greatest joy. And he currently serves as a founding member and co-chair for the City Boulder Police Oversight Panel, and recently served on the board of directors for the Boulder Shelter for the Homeless, and is a 2020 Boulder County Leadership Fellow. Great plug for one of the Boulder Chamber's partner organizations here. So we are grateful to have all of you. So as we do this, what we're going to ask each of our partners to do here is to, if we go to the next slide, we're going to do a brief update, and we're going to start with Megan Newton. Megan, you're free to grab one of those microphones there. Talk into it, and we'll find out. Okay, let's press that button.
There's 2 buttons. One in the bottom.
I forgot to mention, Megan was not in her bio. This AV club was not there.
We can switch my, there you go.
Let's do a quick check.
Check. Yep. I was asked to present where the city is on the work that we've been doing towards homelessness. A couple weeks ago, elected officials from Boulder County and all the municipalities in Boulder County got together to hear this presentation. And so this was the City of Boulder's piece on the work that we're doing on homelessness. And so as you can see, it's a whole wheel, and it scopes the whole continuum of care. And so that goes from outreach to sheltering to some of the supportive services to housing, retention, and I probably should have started with prevention. Prevention is the most important piece. But I wanted to highlight, I'll go over a little bit in sections. I also want to clarify that these are the things that the city directly supports. So this is not the whole spectrum of services that are provided in the community, just the things that the city is currently and formally supporting. So around outreach, we have the homeless outreach team with Boulder Police Department, the court navigators, the community court, and then Be There. The thing I point out on our outreach is that it's all housing focused. So folks do not have to access the shelter to access housing. They can go directly from the street into our housing programs, and all these folks that are doing this work, that's their goal, is to get them on the housing list, to get them with the documents, things you never even think about, IDs, birth certificates, social security cards, things that we take for granted that these folks don't sometimes have, but they work with them every day to get these documents and to get into housing. And then of course, sheltering, all the things that we typically think about when we think about homeless services, the Boulder Shelter, some of the hotels we use in critical weather, the day service center that's coming online. I'll let Mike talk about it, but very, very soon, Together, which is the youth focused shelter, our domestic violence shelters, family hotel, and Haven Ridge. So there's a lot going on in the world of sheltering, but all the shelters also are housing focused. They're helping people in the immediate with the goal of getting them stably housed. I'll jump over the health and go to the housing. I'll point out some of the new stuff that we're doing with the housing, but the shelter acquisition program where they're buying units in the community, and then the unit development, specifically Bluebird, they just had their grand opening tonight. But that's 40 units of PSH. And so knowing that housing is the true solution to homelessness, we need to expand the resources in housing. That's a lot of the stuff that we focus on. We also have a local vouchering program, which basically means that we help them subsidize their rent. The state also does that, the federal government, HUD also does that. So it's a real collaboration of support to help expand the housing resources. We've also noted a gap in the services around retention. We often hear the question of all these folks who move into housing, how many of them are successful? Typically it's very high. Some of our programs up to 90-95% of the folks will remain housed, but we often focus more resources on those folks that tend to cycle and need a little bit more. So we started a new program called Building Home, which includes peer support as well as additional clinical support to these folks to help them remain housed. And then again, I did it, but prevention, I'm doing it last. Well, I'll come back to help, but prevention is the dollars that we put in to prevent homelessness. That is the most efficient, the most effective, the least traumatizing way to address homelessness. And we've honestly struggled in that realm, and that oftentimes when we talk in the homeless world, it's about inflow and outflow, and all this time we've been trying to work to get people out of homelessness. It always seems to outpace the inflow. And so that's where we struggle. We've got more people falling into homelessness than we're able to get out of homelessness. And then also, it kind of goes along with the retention, but the healthcare piece. We're adding new programming with the day service center that will be respite center. So that means folks that don't need hospital level care, but they do need someplace to be 24 hours a day to recuperate. That'll be also housed at the shelter. Our care team, which is partnered with Certain Care, which is a co-response team, that is recently new. And then also we are putting low barrier mental health and substance use recovery into the day center as well. So I know not to talk about all the gaps that we've seen and that we identified. We're working to address those gaps, and we'll continue to work on that. I also would point out the purchase of Tribe, where we're in a partnership with the county and Tribe Recovery, working towards more substance use treatment, low barrier substance use treatment, residential substance use treatment, someplace for people to be as they return. And then another piece that was part of that presentation was some of the stuff that we have identified as, it is not all encompassing, but that we've identified as still needing our attention. So mental and behavioral health services that include treatment credits, expanded peer services, expanded retention services. The program that I noted is ARPA funded. So we have a number of programs that will be timing out in the next couple of years. So those are things that we're looking at as well. Expanded focus on families and youth sheltering. We were at a housing summit a few months back, and it was very jarring to see the number of families that are also, it's growing. I mean, the need is growing in that space as well. But yeah, that's kind of the city's approach in a nutshell. I think it's important to note that it is holistic and that we're touching people straight from the street in all the different places. So we often get in conversations I do in my personal life and I do in this role as, what's the solution? What do we need to do? And it's just not a silver bullet. It's, people didn't get here overnight. The trauma that they've experienced is not easily overcome. So it's very important that we look at the system as a system and a continuum and work at addressing each individual piece.
Wonderful.
Nope.
It's my, now my mic is off. That's how that works. All right, so I'm going to do one last thing before I give up the microphone here. But what we want to do is create a level set for everybody here. So we're going to go around the table here. Go to the next slide, Charlene. We go around. Thank you. We're done. All right. Hold up. Maybe the next slide after that. So, all right, missing some slides there. Anyway, we're gonna go around the table here, and we'll work on our AV excitement in just a second. And there we go. Let's go backwards, a little bit more. And what we're gonna do as we get through our slideshow back in time is we're gonna ask each of our panelists to give us a quick 2-minute update. Do a level setting for us on from your perspective. What are you seeing? What's happening? And then we're going to ask some guided questions that we've already pre-sent to them. So we're going to go and we're going to start with Cole here. If you want to give us your 2-minute update, we'll kindly set the timer for you as well.
All right. So I'll talk about what I'm seeing in Denver and what I'm excited to talk with you all about today, which is that Denver was a city that felt like we didn't have our downtown, and some of the ways that you described, talking about feeling like you don't have the Boulder Creek when Mayor Johnson took office back in July. And Denver is a city where people that were previously living in encampments in downtown are now living indoors safely, and downtown is a safe place for people to enjoy public space. There's no longer encampments in downtown because we took a new approach to addressing encampments that cost money, that was focused on bringing people indoors rather than just moving encampments from block to block. And it brought together outreach work alongside enforcement work that focused on connecting people directly indoors. And so I'm happy to talk a lot more about that as we progress through the conversation today. But I think the main thing that I'm here to share is that homeless encampments are a challenge that we can address. There are proven solutions to that around the country. We've done so effectively in Denver over the last 10 months, and I'm excited to share about that with you all.
Let's go to our next panelist. All right, Michael, you're up next. We've got another microphone right there. So I'm adoring. So not confusing them. So.
Good afternoon, I'm Michael Doherty, I'm the district attorney, and I really appreciate the chamber bringing us together today and identifying this as a valid concern and priority for our community, particularly in the city of Boulder. So I have jurisdiction over criminal offenses that are committed within Boulder County, ranging basically from shoplift and low-level assault up to sex assault and homicides. So my role on this panel is more to talk about where we see the gaps and how they end up flowing into the justice system. So for example, a woman gets assaulted on the bike path, after confronting someone about her bike that had been stolen and she'd seen it at his campsite. He punches her in the face and breaks her nose. Our office prosecutes the case, and he is sentenced to 16 years in state prison. Given his criminal record and what he did to the woman, that was the right outcome. And on one hand, as your district attorney, I can say our staff did a great job and mission accomplished. But I think that's ignoring why you're all here, which is there's more to be done upstream to make sure that doesn't actually happen. That he shouldn't be at a campsite. He shouldn't be there with bike parks and stolen bikes just laying around. And the rule of law has to be enforced at every level. And when I say every level, what I'm referring to is also municipal, which is a separate system. So I'm often asked about the camping ban and any violations of camping bans in the different municipalities, and the district attorney's office actually has no legal authority over it. It's each of the city attorney's offices. So we can talk more about that as we go through it. I will say I got involved in this work with the chamber and also the city of Boulder's high utilizer program. So I do recognize that we can and must do better as a community, particularly around substance abuse and mental health issues. And that when those gaps exist, they do flow into the justice system in some really serious ways. So I'll share with you that 2 of the cases I handled myself last year, that went to trial, one was a murder and one was attempted murder. And the defendant had been experiencing homelessness at the time of each of those incidents. Each of the defendants, and the victims themselves also homeless. Because that's the sad reality. So often victims. Is that 2 minutes?
Those for jury trials, too.
They do. So with that reminder, I'll say we have a lot of panelists up here in a little time. So if there are things I don't get to, I encourage you to reach out to me after too. So thank you.
Yeah, we're gonna have some focusing questions after this, and so we go to our next panelist here. All right, Victor, I'll pass the mic down.
Hi, thanks everyone. I'll give a lot more details in my first answer, but in general, a lot of the progress I've seen is, you know, the heroes of the hardworking people who work at agencies, tirelessly behind the scenes. A lot of those things aren't visible in Central Park. Progress I've seen is again working with some of these folks and seeing what happens behind the scenes.
All right, short and sweet. We'll get more in there shortly. So, all right, Jennifer.
Hey, just a quick overview. So Mental Health Partners, for maybe folks that don't know, we're a nonprofit community mental health center. So I think from our perspective, right, there's a lot we do around services and treatment. There's a lot we do around training and education. We see that's part of our role, partnering to develop programs. And I do think, Megan, as you said, I think we really have seen just the importance of that partnership in working together and not at odds with each other. I think that means, you know, in terms of programming, and that's where we've really seen success. So in addition to some of the behavioral health programs, right now, Mental Health Partners is managing about 547 housing vouchers. So it's a huge part of where we see our in that connection of behavioral health services and that housing. And in regards to services with housing, another large part is around case management. And so really trying to support and serve those that are in housing. How do we help maintain that housing and have that be successful? A few other things I think this year that we've seen, we know with the opioid crisis, just the impacts. And so really we had a campaign this past year around Narcan and fentanyl strips. So this past year, we had about 2,700 Narcan kits distributed and about 1,500 fentanyl strips. And so just, I think a big piece just for us is really around partnering with many folks that we do at this table. That's what really has impact and will help support our communities. So I think just the behavioral health needs in addition to the housing needs. And we've done a lot of success.
Thanks for the teaser on the successes. All right, we're going to jump on. Stephanie. Quick, fingers in. So, and Megan, we've already got you, but last but not least, so Michael Block and then Robin. So, Michael Block. So there we go, Michael. I know there's been some big movements now with the Case Services Center. So, tell us a little bit more.
Well, thanks for having me back again. I think the report is much the same as when I was here a year ago. And we're focusing on parts of the housing focus system that need reinforcing bigger and bigger. That certainly includes the day service center that's emerging, the soft opening in early June, and then go to a full opening in June. We are hiring, but it's a hard that is. It's just one tiny slice of a very complicated pie that we're big, but we're very grateful. The city has been a great partner. Importantly, they looked at this as a holistic opportunity rather than just a service opportunity, and making sure that we have the resources to be able to affect its services and basic services. That's unbelievable. It's been very busy year for us. Obviously, we continue to shelter upwards of 180 people, right? So that alone is the task. On top of that, we've got 180 people now in our support housing program shifts. And we are heading towards adding another 110 or so spots in the next 12 to 18 months. And this is our focus. So there's just to quickly speak about why we're so singularly focused on things because it's unclear to me how and homelessness. What the clients want works the best and saves money, and you can leverage our local dollars to be greater than and bring resources into this community to exit people out of homelessness.
Wonderful. Now we can jump to Robin. Take a vote.
Thank you, everybody. So it's the best thing about going last is that people have already stated obvious. There are really important building blocks to this work. I think the city of Boulder's slide really represented the importance of a systems approach. And Boulder County has been providing leadership to that systems approach through Homeless Solutions for Boulder County. And about 4 years ago, we decided to put our stake in the ground on focusing on housing, realizing that housing first is not about housing only, but we really also wanted to move the services so that every service was connected to a housing exit and not just a service upon service, which does not lead people out of homelessness. So the other role that we play has been really leveraging funding and bringing in millions of dollars of federal and private funding to support housing development as well as the related supported housing services that you've heard is a crucial piece of this work. And we know that this problem is complex and other things need to join the toolbox. And I think many of us are really struggling with what are the missing tools that really support our unhoused individuals as well as lessen the community impacts that you'll hear about. So I think that's enough.
Enough with 20 seconds to spare. So here we go to the, who knows what the next slide is at this point. So I think, does that complete our panel here? All right. So before I hand the microphone over, I also want to thank, this is a regional issue as much as anything else. So I want to thank Mayor Erie Nelson Brooks for being here as well and joining us on this journey because we cannot, my time is up. So with that being said, we are going to go to some, we've had some predetermined questions to help focus our chops a little bit. I want to encourage the rest of you to fill out those note cards there. We'll be collecting those. And this concludes my role as your moderator as I hand it over to our program policy specialist, Devin Edgley, to ask the following questions where our panels will have 3 minutes each. So thank you and look forward to hearing what our panelists have to say.
Thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Devin Edgley. I'm the Policy Program Specialist here at Boulder Chamber. Panelists, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to start with the first question. This is for all of you. What progress have you seen in addressing homelessness in our community and addressing the impacts of our businesses, residents, and visitors over the past year? We can just go down. Starting with you.
You got it. Okay, can you hear me? Yep. Thank you, Devin. So as I mentioned before, I have seen some very hardworking people at various agencies collaborate to get people into housing. There are people that used to exist in the parks and by the creek, and they are now living indoors successfully. I've seen progress behind the scenes. For example, Haven Ridge expanded into a new location that allowed for tribe recovery to open up in the whole space. I've seen moves by the Boulder Shelter for the Homeless to lean heavily in the permanent supportive housing space. Uber and Zaminia, for example. As Michael mentioned, they have almost 200 people who are living indoors in various programs and units overnight. And each night they're also providing emergency services for almost 170 people. The Boulder Shelter has also bravely moved into 24/7 services, and that's a historic shift, and I applaud that. I've also seen how the city has a very well-oiled machine to move people along. For example, you notice how clean the Central Park area is prior to the Creek Fest this weekend. But you wonder how people can be camped outside the mayor's office 10 months of the other year, right? So there's a website that can give pinpoint accuracy on your unhoused person complaint. that will engage a team of caseworkers, safe outdoor managed spaces, and law enforcement to contact this person. I've noticed this particular system is very robust and can temporarily give residences, businesses, and visitors a sigh of relief that something is being done. I would say I would hold the horses on this progress talk. Soon we'll be talking about the good old days of 2024, and it wasn't that bad. We are battling regional and national issues. The progress that we're making is that we're keeping our heads above water. It feels to me that looking at the issue of impacts seems like the window dressing, a clever or perhaps unintentional misdirection from the real elephant in the room. The real issue is not homelessness, substance misuse, or mental health. It's a lack of affordable housing. Tight housing markets accentuate vulnerabilities, and we are making progress in serving the most vulnerable.
Thank you.
Follow up for sure. And I agree. I mean, homelessness is a housing problem, and the lack of affordable housing is a significant driver across the nation and what we're facing. And so let's definitely be clear about that. In terms of speaking about the city of Denver and just some of the progress that we've seen, we declared a state of emergency in Denver on July 18th of last year, set a very public goal to bring 1,000 people indoors by the end of the year, and to prevent encampments from returning in the places where those were previously established. And so I think both of those were important, and I can speak to that a little bit later on, but both the goal of humanely bringing people indoors and the goals of addressing the needs of neighborhoods and community in terms of preventing encampments from returning was very important to us as we push this forward. We achieved that goal by standing up 8 new sites. 5 of those were non-congregate shelter hotels. 3 of those were micro communities or tiny home villages. Those are temporary forms of housing. We need permanent housing, and we need it at scale in order to fully address this challenge. But we're proud that since we launched that initiative, we now brought 1,500 total people indoors in about 10 months' time. 500 of them have been connected to permanent housing through this effort. And we're continuing to make progress and bring people indoors into permanent housing. We just started a by-name list on our 13th encampment today that we're clearing through this work. All those people will have access to indoor options. We've also expanded direct street to lease housing options through our encampment resolution efforts. And so we've demonstrated that we can deploy what we call an encampment resolution model, which really focuses on a geographic-based approach to addressing encampments, brings outreach and enforcement efforts together, and then brings people indoors. And so that is some of the progress that we're seeing in Denver.
Before you hand that down, thank you so much for making the drive. I just want to ask you something specifically.
Sure.
Do you have any advice for Boulder, things that you'd recommend we try, or what we should shy away from?
Sure. I mean, I would, I don't obviously understand all the work that you all have been doing over the last great bit of time. And so one of the experts that are on this panel, it's being done throughout the community. I think for me, the biggest shift that we made was that there's sort of an approach to doing just general citywide street outreach, which does bring people indoors successfully and get people connected to housing, but doesn't necessarily address the encampment challenges in public space in the ways that we have been effective at doing now in Denver for the last 10 months. And so the biggest advice that I would give is to really adopt alongside of general citywide street outreach efforts a geographic-based approach to addressing encampments. This is what the city of Houston started doing 10 years ago and has been written up in the New York Times as sort of a best practice model. There's other communities across the country that have developed this model in recent years, and we were one of those cities that helped push that forward. The U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness just came out with a 19-pronged approach to addressing encampments. They solicited feedback from communities all over the country in order to think about how do we address homelessness in public space. There's a ton of great recommendations there. And so I really think, we're in a new moment in homelessness response because the ways in which the affordable housing crisis has really impacted us so greatly all across the country. And so in some ways, the response system that was designed, 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago now needs some new iteration and new intervention. And so I think this approach to addressing encampments is one that can be done in communities across the country and can be done at scale. So
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank Victor because he made my job a lot easier. Maybe I can just finish what he said by saying a few data points. This overview. Partnership with local community health, and I see Grant in the audience here today. They're a big supporter of program where we send housing expertise in the form of a case manager. That's your list. The results are the 80% reduction in ER. This is why the shelter will need so much housing. This is why housing is said out loud. Similarly, the muni courts have studied the impact on criminal behavior. The result is a 90% reduction in criminal behavior for the school system. As a result, this is why it's so strong. Folks who are housed don't care. This is why we're so strong in this. And so, just to reiterate, again, why the shelter has convinced itself and made such a massive switch since 2015 to today, to be so laser focused on the ultimate goal of getting people. This is why, and it changes people's lives. It affects real individuals every single day. They are suffering, and they need us to be at our best. We have to follow data. You have to follow what they're telling us, what they want to be. Most of them, every time you ask, 95% of the people who are surveyed in shelter just want to be housed. Let's do it. Let's do what's best. Let's do what works for us. That's what we're doing. That's the progress we've made. And we're excited to do more. We're ready to do more. The city wants us to do more. The county wants us to do more. The state wants us to do more. We are. So,
I would just echo everything that got said, but I would add something that hasn't been said as progress is the amount of collaboration that happens at this table, that happens in the service providers every day. I sit in meetings regularly, multiple times a week, high utilizers twice a month, where service providers are literally sitting and talking about people and service planning. The collaboration is remarkable and amazing, and it does not happen everywhere. And so I think that is a big strength of Boulder. I say it often, it's got the right blend of size and compassion, and that folks are able to talk about people individually and bring resources to the table to address the need. And so I think that is a great strength of our community, but I would also echo everything that's already said.
So in looking at it through the criminal justice lens, what I would share with you is we did a deep dive data analysis, all our data for 1 year. And we had 10% of our felony caseload coming to us with defendants who were experiencing homelessness at the time they committed the felony. So 10%. So when I share that, some people say that's a highly disproportionate number for a small part of the population to be committing that many felonies. Others say, why are you talking about it? You have 90% of your cases involving housed individuals. And then the third reaction sometimes I get is Boulder PD is clearly over-policing the homeless, otherwise you wouldn't have 10%. I tend to be very data-driven, and I'm not in a room where that's the reaction. But I tend to be very data-driven. What I've found and what I strongly believe is that when we talk about the high utilizers, for example, a lot of those are really low-level misdemeanor offenses, which is why the law has to be enforced and there has to be consequences, but we're not going to jail our way out of this crisis. So someone gets picked up for a theft offense, he goes to the jail for 6 months. This is an actual case. He gets released, and the only place he has to go is the Boulder Homeless Shelter. That story is not going to end, and did not end, until he was connected to services through the high utilizer. So we have these gaps that exist with substance abuse and mental health issues, highly acute issues. And I'm not on this panel with people who are experts in homelessness, and I'm not. But I've been in criminal justice my career, and with that, I'll say, If we went up to the band shell right now and we had someone who opened the condos across the street from the band shell and said, you can all move into those condos. If they're addicted to fentanyl and meth and have mental health issues, that's not enough. So it really is a complex problem where we need to push more services to these people while also making sure that we're keeping the community safe. And that's why I'm here, because we see these gaps flowing into the justice system, and I know we can do better. We've made some progress with the high utilizer program. Those are people who are hitting multiple systems, not just the police department and the DA's office, municipal, also homeless shelter, hospitals, and so on. Trying to identify how can we push services to them to try to make a difference and lessen the impact they're having on the community. And talk more about that there.
Thank you. I agree with what has been said, and I want to emphasize the collaboration piece. Many of you may remember the federal 10-year plan to end homelessness, which was really about increasing services, but it didn't end homelessness, obviously. At that time, we were all separate agencies doing our core work as opposed to coordinating and collaborating, leveraging our focus. And now we're all rowing in the same direction. And I think that seems simple, but it's very complicated. As you know, we have a deep and broad, skilled layer of nonprofit human service agencies that do this work in and out every day. And they're at all the meetings that Megan mentioned under the systems approach. So I think that's really important to note. Similarly, in the 4 years we've been doing this work, so the 10-year plan, we didn't really even have data. We didn't know who the homeless were. We didn't know what their needs were, and we didn't know what's the right service model or the right amount of service that people needed. We know that now because we're much more data driven, as Michael said. And we spent a lot of time figuring out how to get data and analyze the data and make data-driven decisions. So now, in the last 4 years, we've housed almost 3,000 people. And that doesn't solve the problem because, as Megan alluded to earlier, we don't know how to shut off the spigot. So the outflow has increased. We're really proud of that. And I can't remember who said it, but it is an untold. So I'm really happy today to speak a little bit more to that.
Well, it's kind of tough going last year. Yeah, I mean, really a lot of what's been said. I think just speak about two other things. I think in regards to the collaboration and the importance of that is really around the complexity of the issues that we are seeing and experiencing as a community. And that it really does need to be all hands on. There's no one solution. There's no one agency that is going to be able to fix the problem. And I think that's where for us, MHP has come in where we know there's significant mental health and behavioral health issues within our community that we want to try to be a part of. We're not the only solution, but be a part of that. And I think some of the success that we've seen is, as many of us at this table have been a part of, conversations and meetings and, looking at funding opportunities, is where are the service areas that we as mental health partners can fit into that gap. And I think for us, this year we received a grant to open an urgent psych clinic, and that was seen as a need. It had come out of the behavioral health roadmap. And we were like, all right, we can do that. We have the expertise to do that. We got the funding to do that piece. I think we've also looked at just expansion of intensive outpatient services for substance use, expanding our NAT services, the medication assistant treatment services, and really looking at acute care building that we're hoping that will be developing and expanding some of those services. So that, in conjunction with a lot of the partnership that we have at this table around housing. So expanding our permanent supportive housing vouchers, expanding our tenant-based housing vouchers, and that together is gonna help support the needs of the community. And I just think, I really do echo just the complexity, the importance of the collaboration, and there really isn't one, answer, right? It's gonna take a lot of different pieces across the continuum to really try to affect and make change and impact.
Thank you all for your answers to that first question. Before we start our second question, if anybody still has a card that they would like picked up for Q&A, please raise it or down your row, and I will get it sent. Thank you so much. Okay, so here's our second question for our panelists. What additional programs do we need to implement, and what actions do we need to take to help reduce homelessness in our community and address impact on businesses, residents, and visitors? And we can, how about since you didn't go last time, please start with you first.
All right, so I think it's already been said to really, to address homelessness is affordable housing is a huge piece, right? I think affordable housing that people can use vouchers with. I think one possibility is housing without hidden fees. I think sometimes people can find housing and use the other vouchers, and then there's additional fees that make it difficult for people with limited income to be able to afford living there. I think support services, increasing that while people are in housing. We know that that helps support success. So we think about it for our, folks that are working specifically with individuals. If there's too many someone's trying to serve, that makes it hard to really help support with success. And then I think education and support for landlords, there's a lot that goes into that, and needs, and how do we help support and assist with, some of the things that they're dealing with. And I think to also better understand what permanent supportive housing is.
This is a little bit of a trick question for me, a little bit, because we don't have unlimited resources. If we did, we could likely think of a new program that might be helpful, or we could implement a program that you've heard is definitely needed, and that's about treatment, mental health treatment and behavioral health treatment. I worry that we don't have the right tools in the toolbox, and one of the tools I think is really how best to support people into the treatment that does exist. And for many clients, they have many reasons. For unhoused people, they have many reasons why they don't access treatment. And we have to be careful about assuming it's one big population that's all the same. Because it's not. People have very individual histories, experience with trauma, as well as their own mental health and substance use issues. So, as Michael said, we can't jail our way out of this problem. I'm not sure we can build enough housing in our community to get out of the way. We do follow the Houston model. We've been doing it for a long time. The big difference is access to housing. And even to do what Denver's been doing, we don't have a suite of hotel rooms to bring people all in. So I'll stop there.
So I'm going to start more broadly and then funnel down my answer. But Colorado ranks in the bottom 10 in the country for mental health treatment and substance abuse treatment being available in the community. That's a state. And then we feel the brunt of that in our local communities when you walk on the free path or you come into the courthouse. And that's a fact. So I appreciate legislators like Judy Mobley and others kind of older who are fighting for more mental health treatment statewide. That has to be a part of this. Substance abuse piece is really important as well. We see that over and over again. We started a drug diversion program and a mental health diversion program in the courthouse here in Boulder County. Mental health diversion program, one quick example, we had a guy who'd been arrested hundreds of times. All really low-level offenses. Because if they weren't low level, he wouldn't be out in the community committing them at 36, 37, and 38 and so on. Get him in the mental health diversion program in 2020. He's been arrested once since. And that's because we're reallocating the resources that were just being thrown away with each one of those arrests and connected him with the treatment and got him into housing through the community agencies that are up. The alternative sentencing facility will be coming online next year, thanks to the voters who agreed to fund that. That will also be really helpful. And each of the law enforcement agencies in Boulder County, of which we have 9, nearly all of them now have responder teams and models of some kind or another, and workers who are dedicated to helping individuals who struggle. The other step I would love to see us take is around the high utilizer program, recognizing that there are multiple priorities and a lot of needs represented just even here at this table. But from my perspective, and again, as district attorney, these are individuals who are having a disproportionate impact on the community. So pushing services to them, and when those services fail to address the problem, making sure we have appropriate consequences. We've seen some real progress. So we've had people get connected to services, housing, and get off the list. And we also have better information sharing between Boulder PD, municipal court, and our office now. On a daily basis, if one of them is arrested, there's a notification that goes out that both Chief Redfern and I are. And that just helped us ensure that we have a better response and service level, also with consequences. So that high utilizer program, we've made some progress. We were here, Steve Redfern and I were at this table 2 weeks ago for a panel discussion in the chamber talking about the need for funding to take it to the next level. So we'll continue talking about that and moving forward with that. Thank you.
I think a piece that hasn't been talked about that would be the prevention piece. I've been doing this work, as Jonathan mentioned, for 20 years and only the last year and a half in policy. And it is hard work for sure on a daily basis, but you see the success on an individual basis. We see folks go from the park into housing and thrive. But on a systems level, the amount of work that gets done for folks to not realize that the work is being done is super frustrating. So I feel like, as Robin mentioned, being able to figure out a way through prevention to stop the spigot. So when we make these successes, when folks are housed and things are going so well, that folks aren't like, I don't think you guys are doing anything. So moving them all on their back. So really a way to invest in prevention. It's good for the human being not to have to experience this traumatic, but also good for the system. The system will not succeed if you keep people keep flowing into it.
Well, I think this shelter really helped itself 10 years ago when it stopped there for the 10,000 foot level, started looking at its impact, its vision from 30, 60,000. And I think I would encourage us to sort of do the same as a community. I don't think we're fun for producing business. You heard talk about it, you heard Megan talk about it. We will see a reduction by exits exceed system limits. Period. And I think that we really have to consider that carefully. Right now, I think we're amazing. Last 10 years have been amazing. So significant. Our partnerships with the city and the county were meaningful. Right? It just did not exist for the first 30 years of existence. It's awesome. But how do we take a system where we are in management mode, the individual, turn it into a system producing homelessness for the community? And I think that's a journey in wrestling exactly what this mission is. How many people are becoming this? And how do we get that number? How do we agree on what that number is? We do a deep dive on that and agree what is X means, so that we can start to reduce homelessness on the streets. That conversation is full of very, very difficult. And I know that that's a very difficult decision to have, initiate, stay calm around, a lot of competing interests and fun. But I really think that we need to go back and think about it, and then trickle down from there into strategy and funding and development. So that's how I think we can do it. I think that's what our next step is. And I'd love to see us take that. And yeah, I just, and for sure, as you've heard over and over again, I think most every analyst, that this is about great housing. And that's what we have. That next most something is how many people can get off the street and in their homes with housing. And for sure, housing that includes the kind of support that is reacted to their acuity of need. That's why we're providing funding. City, right to people starting to clinicians not being. We can do it. Unbelievably proud of it, but I think we really need to, yeah, really try to embrace a new vision, a new project, and work down to the street level so we can.
Beautiful. I agree with so much of what has been said, and I would just add one thing into the conversation. So, I think that, when you speak with a housing advocate, and you speak with a homeowner or business owner, both of those individuals might say that we need to address homelessness, we need to reduce homelessness, we need to do something about homelessness. Often what they mean by that is something different. And so for the housing advocate, we want to get someone indoors into housing. For the business owner, they want homelessness to go. I think what we have been working on is trying to do both of those things. And trying to lead from our values of getting people indoors and connected to housing, and also trying to respond to the community-based need to address homelessness in public space. And so, just the thing that I inserted into this conversation is that the thing that I would add is that if you were to choose a particular geography in Boulder where you said, we're going to take every single person within this 2-block radius or within this 1-mile radius or whatever it may be, we're going to go out through outreach, get to know every single one of their names, and identify that okay, in that radius there's 40 people. We're going to get all of those people into housing, and then afterwards we're not going to allow camping to return there. So we're going to return this space back to the public and allow it to be what we all want it to be. We're going to get people connected to housing and to do that. That would be something that you could do, that would be feasible, and that you could utilize housing resources, you could utilize local preference vouchers, you could work around this table to identify what are the 10 rooms that you can come up with, the 5 rooms that you can come up with, and that for those 40 people you could resolve homelessness, and that particular geography you could address the visibility of encampments in public space. And so that is the thing that I would add in. That's what we call encampment resolution. And it's
Thank you. So in my view, like Michael said, we're not one program away from solving this. So I don't think we need a lot of new programs in Boulder. We need to maintain the existing infrastructure and programs. Many places right now have issues with staffing. Adding new programs will already stretch thin resources. For example, as Jim mentioned, there are programs around mental assistance, housing stabilization, landlord liaisons, supportive housing, mobile food banks. All these are critical. Some areas that we can have some action. It would be nice if we had a recovery-friendly employer that people could go to, whether they're housed or in-house, not having to go to a day labor service, not having to work at Goodwill or McDonald's and get a job there, but a really local recovery-friendly employer. I say that because we're at the chamber, and surely someone knows someone that can say, hey, let's give this person a job, I'll help them restore their human dignity. Used to be you can go to the Puddle Car Wash on 28. They have machines there now. You can't even like wash cars and make like $300 with it, right? So that's one thing that stands out to me. The other thing is just, I'm glad that Erie is here, but we need to put more pressure on our regional partners. Lafayette, Louisville, Netherlands. Why is every halfway house, teen shelter, women's shelter, adult shelter located in Boulder? Longmont has made some steps, but Boulder is, carrying the brunt of that. And so putting more pressure on the regional partners to be brave and open up the things that they haven't opened up before.
Thank you. Since you have a since you have the microphone, I'm gonna ask you a question. Since you're recovery coach manager, where do you send people who want help?
So you can't just send people who want help to one person. They need multiple pillars of support. So, for example, if you send someone to a shelter, that's not enough. They need a case manager at mental health partner. They need a connection at clinical. They need someone helping them just to get their mail. So, or when I send someone to get help, I would send them to 8 different people. Make sure they have connections to 8 different kind of programs. And holistically, maybe it's the environment, maybe it's their physical need, maybe it's their emotional need, maybe they just need to go to a dentist, right? And then we can also work on other issues. But if you just focus on, I'm just going to send you to substance use health and ignore your financial issues, ignore your emotional needs, that's not really going to work.
Thank you for that. And would you mind passing that to Paul? Paul, can you tell us some of the obstacles and challenges where maybe you have failed in implementing strategy and the light at the end of the tunnel, the success with those challenges?
So again, I want to emphasize that the thing that I've been talking about is a very specific thing. You need everything that has been discussed at this table. So just do that again and again and again. I think, when you think about what we did in Denver, obviously there were particular, built environment opportunities that presented themselves to us that you don't have in Boulder. And so that's a constraint. That for us, that was an opportunity. There's a significant cost to doing so. We in a window where there's one-time ARPA dollars that are available through the state and through the city and the federal government. So we've leveraged those. It's kind of been a historic window to make progress. We, stood up programs very quickly, and so we have all these brand new programs now that are learning how to operate, and they're sort of getting their feet underneath them. That comes with challenges that sometimes you maybe read about in the news or hear about on 9 News, but don't believe everything that you hear. They're not all as bad as they would suggest. And so I think, I guess what I would say is that, we took a really bold step forward because we felt like that was what we had to do. We felt morally obligated to do that. And every time that, when you make bold progress, there's things that sort of clean up on the back end. And so there's a lot of work that we have ongoing right now to make what we set up very quickly sustainable long-term sustainable funding sources, long-term sustainable recruiting, and all that sort of thing. And so, yeah, we've learned a lot in 10 months of working at this, but I think all along the way we've been really committed to a singular goal. We want to end unsheltered homelessness in Denver. We can do that by bringing everyone indoors, and so that's our star. And
Thank you for that. Okay, Ms. Bohannon, I have a question for you. Please answer if you can. How many shelter beds are in Boulder County?
I wonder if Michael can answer this. We really only have one traditional emergency shelter, which is the Boulder shelter. And I think Michael, you said 180 beds. There is a program in Longmont that's run through Hope. It has, I think, their regular bed count is around 30. Do I have that right, Megan? Yeah. And those expand during critical weather moments. So that's the amount of traditional shelter beds.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask Megan a question, please. Let's see. City update. The county presentation had a cost of $15 million. Does the city have an update on costs for homelessness implementation?
When we did the similar work for the electeds, we landed on 12 million. There's a lot of caveats because there are programs that do touch folks experiencing homelessness, but that's not their dedicated use. And so we do a little bit of estimates on that, but 12 million is the number.
Thank you. And Michael Block, can I ask you a question? How do we prevent new homeless individuals from taking those removed from the streets and put into housing programs? How do we prevent new homeless individuals from taking the space of those removed from the streets and put into housing programs? Should I skip that one?
So,
I think that's what the question is posed.
um, I think we should probably talk about inflow as honestly as we can, and it can be a bit of a, so, I think, I've looked at this extensively, and I think that we can all agree that on a national basis, this is fairly overstated. And people are traveling and highly affecting in most communities. Most communities are experiencing due to high health. I've also looked at our local data, and it does seem as though Boulder is a bit of, and so there have been a lot of data at a county level and survey levels through the years that really indicate that a lot of folks are already homeless. And so I'm not sure if I have. I would really reflect back on what I said and trying to get to a place where we are understanding what our inflow is and understanding how they are in order to see the inflow. I think that we need to wrestle with the question of, do we actually have any on the number of people that are arriving now? I think that is a very legitimate question for the folks who always ask. It's a legitimate question for the chamber to ask. Legitimate question. And we may answer that by saying no. There's nothing that we can really do. There's no community that has done anything to stem the inflow. Living in communities forward. Or we may find that there are some levers that we can pull. But we'll say this, that once we really understand what the problem is, then we can understand what the solution is. That's really the barrier. We need funding in order to create expenses. And so when we understand the inputs, we take on this challenge and we try to have robust conversations about whether or not we can. Then we can finally understand what our responsibilities is. That will be very, very difficult. And by the way, we may come to a place where we don't think that's we need, I think, to embrace the challenge. I think in order to honor the folks, we understand what's going to take. Provider, we have to take the community, we're supposed to be responsible to the community. If you tell me that we're responsible, why, then I know what my job is. And I can respond by saying it's going to take this, it's going to take this much. Then the city knows what its job is. Megan knows what her job is. Robin knows what her job is. We can have an answer to the community as to what it's going to take to reduce homelessness.
Thank you so much for navigating that question for me. I have one more question. Would you mind answering one more for me? How have you seen the chronically homeless best stabilized into permanent housing?
How have I seen that?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you've heard me say it ad nauseam here. So obviously, I'm a big believer that it's very difficult to address any challenge that anyone faces until they're out. And so chronic homeless folks tend to be those who are facing the biggest challenges. They are the ones who are the least lucky. And so what we need to do is create a housing system that accommodates the resulting housing exit for individuals. So what that means is you need people on the ground who are serving those folks, outreach workers, shelter workers, case managers, folks in the jail, folks in the hospital, who can establish relationships with these folks and help them navigate to services and resources. We have to find ways to make it. You don't get housed unless you can pay the rent. That can look different for different people in different places in their lives. So some people, it can be a plane ticket. Sometimes it's fixing their car. Sometimes it's a deposit. Sometimes it's rental assistance. And for those with the biggest challenges and the worst luck, It can look like permanent supportive housing, we're paying the rent, finding a place to live. We are following them into their home and providing case management services and clinical services as their acuity of need, demands. And so, this is the project, and that's how we do it. You have to have durable assets for people to live in. It's unavoidable. You make the rent affordable and we can't find a place for them to live in an environment of unbelievably low vacancy, vulnerable. We can't utilize that rental system. So the third part of the system has to be the creation of durable assets or accessing durable assets for people. The fourth part of that system is again having robust so when they get they stay housed. And it's not perfect. It works about 85% of the time, not return to homelessness. It's individuals facing blocks and opportunities. But it's by far you ever imagine. And that's why I always speak about being the most reliable. Not, it doesn't work for them. That shouldn't distract them. And we shouldn't let housing be defined by. Let's really remember it's the most role. And it creates access to desperately needed treatment that people need in order to stay housed and increase their well-being.
Thank you very much. I believe that closes our Q&A for our panelists. Thank you all so much for participating and
thank you. I have a couple thank yous as well, and I wanted to get us out at 5:30. It's already 5:30, so I will be very brief. I'm Rachel Friend. Thank you all for being here. I want to anybody who's involved as a provider or works day to day in homelessness services or resistant to raise their hand, please. We can give you all a huge. I want to invite people to fill out the QR. I don't know. Hopefully, it's still up on your phone. We have one finale question. Yeah, which is up there, so we'll repeat it. And then we'll just invite you to email me and Leslie Durgan or Leslie Durgan. We'll have another panel. We will keep doing the work. And if you would like to be more involved or have questions or comments, please reach out to us. Thank you again for being here. And as the council members have to get to a meeting, so we're closing it out.
All right, folks, as you can see, white on white does not work particularly well. We did ask 2 questions. So what we'll do is we'll email you the responses to that. And if your question was not asked, please reach out to us. This continues to be a work in progress. That was a 2-part question on your Mentimeter. So as we can see, there is people, now that you've heard a little bit more, we're hearing more folks saying that it's improving. We'll look for the remainder of the 24 of you who have not yet responded. Next time we'll do it involved. But the true prize really is our panel. So thanks again to our panel. Thank you all of you. Feel free to stick around for a few minutes unless you're on city council.